Welcome to the Bitcoin Infinity Academy, brought to you by the Plan B Network and Bitbox. This is Chapter 6 of Sovereignty Through Mathematics. I'm Knut Svanholm, and I'm here, as always, with my partner in victimless crime, Luke the Wolf. Yes, how are you today, Luke?
I'm wonderful, Knut. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. How am I? I'm all good. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Excited to be here. The Academy episodes are always fun.
Yes, they are. And this is the one about what Americans call scarcity, what Brits call scarcity, and what pirates calls scarcity. Yes.
Well, we're sure in a good mood today. Before we dive in, just a reminder: if you'd like to get involved, join the Academy, get involved in the discussion, and maybe even join the episodes while we're recording them, go to our Geyser page. You'll get all of the info about how to join the Academy. That's geyser.fund/project/infinity. All the info is there. So just take a look. Anything to add, Knut?
No, come join us. We have fun here.
We have fun here, as you can tell. Okay, I think I'll just dive into the chapter. Scarcity, Chapter 6 of Sovereignty Through Mathematics. What makes a commodity scarce? What is scarcity in the first place? What other properties can be deducted from an object's scarcity? How are scarcity, energy, time, and value connected? Scarcity might seem easy to describe on the surface, but in reality, it's not. Not when you take infinity into account. Infinity is a concept that has puzzled the human mind for as long as it has been able to imagine it. If it ever has. It is a very abstract concept, and it's always linked to time, simply because even imagining an infinite number would take an infinite amount of time. If we truly live in an infinite universe, scarcity cannot exist. If something exists in an infinite universe, an infinite number of copies of this something must also exist, since the profitability of this being true would also be infinite in an infinite universe. Therefore, scarcity must always be defined within a set framework. No frame, no scarcity. Knut?
Yeah, this is a long and convoluted way to say that scarcity is always local. There's a difference between finiteness and scarcity, or finity, maybe. Is that even a word? Finity?
Sure.
As opposed to the opposite of infinity. Let's say finiteness, maybe.
Finiteness, I think, is the real word, yes.
Yeah, so I'd say scarcity, this is as I said, this long and convoluted way of saying that scarcity is local. What matters is something is scarce in relation to the sum total of that thing.
Okay, yeah. So this is a framing device, basically. The concept of scarcity is what we're tackling, right?
Yeah, so this is also alluding to the age-old fact that there's an ever-increasing amount of fiat, there's an ever-increasing amount of crypto, and there's a limited amount of Bitcoin. It's very different in that sense.
You're jumping ahead just a little bit here. Yeah. But I think a point on this is definitely that I think the idea of something being infinite, or that it can go on and on and on, is also something that we don't really think about. It's kind of the inflation problem, right? We basically have an issue that technically the money supply or money supplies can go on forever, right? But we don't perceive that, right? The imagining the infinite number would take an infinite amount of time. That specifically, I think, is the point to get across here. We don't intuit that something could go on forever and ever.
No, it's literally impossible to wrap your head around. And there's so much written on the concept of infinity, and it's just purely mathematically, it's such an interesting concept. I don't know if the probability of something being true is exactly spot on, but I say in some sense it is. If you have an infinite amount of time to go look for something in an infinite space, and other stuff exists in that space somewhere, that sort of implies that you will find another Earth at some point. But yeah, let's not get into the whole philosophical, mathematical infinity concept. Hotel infinity, what's it called? The Hillebrand's Hotel, right? where there's an infinite amount of rooms, and if all the rooms are full and there's one more guest, you can still fit them in by just moving everyone into like room 2 instead of room 1 and so on. And if there's an infinite amount of guests, yet another infinite amount of guests, you can fix the problem by moving everyone into even numbers and then put all the new guests into odd numbered rooms. So like there are so many weird things, properties of infinity and different sizes of infinities and stuff like that. But we're not going into that here. It's not the gist of the chapter.
Sure. Okay.
It's just me being a physics nerd here or something.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe let's see where this goes after the next paragraph or two.
Yeah, sure.
Think of it this way. The most expensive artwork ever sold at the time of writing was the Salvator Mundi, painted by Leonardo da Vinci. It's not even a particularly beautiful painting, so why the high price? Because da Vinci originals are scarce. A poster of the painting isn't expensive at all, but the original will cost you at least $450 million US. All because we agree to frame its scarcity around the notion that it is a da Vinci original, of which under 20 exist today. Historically, scarcity has always been framed around real-world limits to the supply of a good. Most of the great thinkers of the Austrian School of Economics from the 20th century believed that the value of a monetary good arises from its scarcity, and that scarcity is always connected to the real-world availability of that good. Most of them believed that a gold standard would be the hardest form of money that we would ever see, and the closest thing to an absolutely scarce resource as we would ever know. Okay, so now I think we're into the connection to currency and Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. And today I probably would have used the word finiteness instead of scarcity here. But it's still, alluding to this Bitcoin is not gold 2.0 thought. Like Bitcoin is much, much, much more finite than gold. Finding new gold is only a matter of how much money you put into finding new gold, whereas it doesn't matter how much money you put into trying to find another Bitcoin, you still won't find more than 21 million of them. Yeah, and we get into what that actually means later on in the chapter, so I won't spoil it too early this time.
Well, and again, I think here one of the points is definitely about that the limits to the supply of a good. That's the key point here that basically got broken with fiat currency generally. That the ability for a government to print money in the easy way of looking at it, or allow a lower interest rate on loans that just get created out of thin air by the fiat of a central bank. Those are the limits that were taken off of the monetary system, and now we're basically seeing the effects of that.
There's a great Rothbard book called What Has Government Done to Our Money, I think is the title, where he explains how all inflation is theft, like that you can't get around that is theft. Like, as we've discussed before, fiat was born as like receipts for things you had in a vault, so like mostly gold. So you had a certain amount of gold in a vault somewhere. The receipt for the gold was like the first monetary bill. People realized that they could trade the receipts instead of trade the actual gold itself, which is much heavier to carry around and harder, not as divisible and so on. But if you can't get the gold back, you are being stolen from. And there's like no excuses for that, even though modern monetary theory and Keynesian economics makes up all kinds of excuses for why it's okay to inflate the money supply. But it simply isn't. Not if your goal is sound money, like not if your goal is to have a proper form of money.
Right. And I think in the next paragraph here, we're going to transition from gold to Bitcoin. So should we just do that?
Absolutely.
Okay. In the late 90s, the cryptographers that laid the groundwork for what would become Bitcoin reimagined scarcity as anything with an unforgeable costliness. This mindset is key to understanding the connection between scarcity and value. Anything can be viewed as scarce if it's sufficiently hard to produce and hard to fake the production cost of. In other words, easy to verify the validity of. The zeros at the beginning of a hashed Bitcoin block are the proof of work that proves that the created coins in that block were costly to produce. People who promote the idea that the mining algorithm used to produce Bitcoin could be more environmentally friendly or streamlined are either deliberately lying or missing the point. The energy expenditure is the very thing that gives the token its value because it provides proof to the network that enough computing power was sacrificed in order to keep the network sufficiently decentralized and thus resistant to change. Easy to verify is the flip side of the unforgeable costliness coin. The validity of a Bitcoin block is very easy to verify since all you need to do is look at its hash, make sure the block is part of the strongest chain, and that it conforms to all consensus rules. In order to check whether a gold bar is real or not, you probably need to trust a third party. Fiat money often comes with a plethora of water stamps, holograms, and metal stripes. So in a sense, they're hard to forge. What you cannot know about a fiat currency at any given moment, though, is how much of it is in circulation. What you do know about fiat currencies is that they're not scarce. Now we're into the meat of it.
Yeah, this unforgeable costliness being the flip side of the easy to verify coin. I really like that. If you understand what a hashing algorithm is and how hard it is to find a number beginning with that many zeros, and if you know about the difficulty adjustment algorithm and like how your miners, how many guesses miners guess each second. I think I talked to Bob Burnett about this. It's like he said something like these miners only produce like 200 exahashes or something like that, which is like was like 200 million guesses per second. It's like it's retarded much if you really unpack what it is. So if you understand that, it's very easy to see that there's an extremely high possibility or high probability that a ton of work was put into finding the block. This is alluding to that, I guess, and like pointing that out.
The other point that you made that was, I think, pretty important here is the difference between gold, the verificability. That a word, verificability.
I love that word, verificability.
Yeah. Of gold is, well, you essentially have to melt it down. But with Bitcoin, you can just validate it yourself. You can run the blockchain on your node and validate it yourself by checking it against the consensus rules. Gold is not possible. You can be pretty sure, but weighing it doesn't work. Could be tungsten.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, this is allegedly where the term sound money comes from, but I've been informed that that is not a fact at all, but just a rumor that it was because of the literal sound the gold coin made when you threw it to the floor or dropped it to the floor. So you could detect if it was the correct material, but I don't buy that.
I've heard the same one. I've also heard the same reason that it's not that, but whatever. People have been faking gold and silver since its beginning, and being able to shave little bits off of coins. You can't do that with Bitcoin. You can literally take a fee and give someone slightly less of a UTXO, but that's completely transparent.
Yeah, what you can do is sell paper Bitcoin, which is not Bitcoin.
Sure, but if it lands on the blockchain in a valid block, that's it.
Yeah,
that's it. Can't fake that.
Absolutely, no,
can't fake that.
Oh, by the way, did you see the meme about? We talked about the difficulty adjustment algorithm here, and you saw that meme with just two circles, a Venn diagram, and in one is like people who oppose Bitcoin, and the other is people who understand the difficulty adjustment algorithm, and then the intersection is like no one I ever met. And I agree with that totally. I have never encountered a person who can explain the difficulty adjustment algorithm and is also against Bitcoin. Those people don't exist.
Yep. Fantastic point. Shall we continue the discussion?
Sure.
Bitcoin provides us with absolute scarcity for the first time in human history. It is a remarkable breakthrough. Even though you can't make jewelry or anything else out of Bitcoin, its total supply is fixed. After the year 2140, after the last Bitcoin has been mined, the total amount of Bitcoin in circulation can only go down. This limited supply is what the gold standards of the past were there for in the first place. Bitcoin's supply is much more limited than that of gold, however, since they will be lost as time goes by. Since the supply is so limited, it doesn't matter what the current demand is. The potential upside to its value is literally limitless due to this relationship between supply and demand. The backing that other currencies have is only there to assume people that the currency will keep its value over time, and the only way of ensuring this is to limit the supply. Bitcoin does this better than any other thing before it. Leonardo da Vinci's original paintings are extremely valuable because of Leonardo's brand name and the fact that there are only about 13 of them left. One day, there will be less than one left. The same is true for Bitcoin.
Yeah, imagine that. What year do you think we're in when there's just one Bitcoin left?
Probably pretty far into the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And this is so mind-bending. It reminds me of something Michael Dunworth said in a panel in Sydney here, when I was in Sydney a couple of months back, that Bitcoin is the first thing that humans have built but cannot destroy. And I love that framing, which is also why I really like viewing it as a discovery and not something humans built or invented, but something humans discovered, because I think it is an agreement on a fixed set of rules. It's like it's more of a way to communicate that we have discovered, a way to communicate that makes theft or makes lying too costly. If you view it that way, it's much easier to understand why there can't be more than 21 million. It's literally because we agree that they shouldn't be. Humans have decided that, and we define a Bitcoin as a 1/21 millionth of the total supply that will ever be, or something close to that. Anyway, that's not the exact formula, but anyway, there's something there.
Okay. On to the next one. Scarcity on the internet was long believed to be an impossible invention, and it took a multi-talented genius such as Satoshi Nakamoto to figure out all the different parts that make Bitcoin so much more than the sum of them. His disappearance from the project was one such part, maybe the most important one. The thing about computerized scarcity is that it was a one-time invention. Once it was invented, the invention could not be recreated. That's just the nature of data. Computers are designed to be able to replicate any data set any number of times. This is true for every piece of code there is, and digital scarcity needed to be framed somehow to work. Bitcoin's consensus rules provided such a frame. Bitcoin certainly seems to provide true digital scarcity, and if the game theoretical theories that it builds on are correct, its promise of an ever-increasing value will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah, that should make the bullish in the room pretty excited.
Yeah, and it's also like this is an idea embryo that is refined in the later books, right? This one in particular is what turned into the one-shot principle in the second book, where I call it resistance to replicability instead of computerized scarcity, which is a weird term. But yeah, the only thing this is a way to make something uncopyable over the internet, really, like something you cannot copy in the realm of computers. That's what intrigued me in the first place about Bitcoin. It was not like monetary stuff. It's like, holy shit, like, are you telling me that there's a thing now on computers that cannot be copied? Like, I couldn't wrap my head around that. That's very strange. But it's like inverting the very purpose of computing power and deliberately using as much of it as possible to do absolutely nothing except guessing the wrong number over and over again until you find the right one. So it's a completely new way, a novel way of using computers and looking at computing power. So like instead of actually making the computer solve something. Like it's always advertised that as Bitcoin miners solve really complicated mathematical problems. They do not. They guess a number. There's mathematics involved, but it's not super complicated. It's somewhat complicated if you're a layman, but at the end of the day, they're guessing a number, and most of those guesses are wrong. So and you can view that as waste, but it's just a different way of using computing power, sacrificing something to create something that is finite and cannot be copied, that is scarce.
Should we move on?
Sure.
In 2018, the inflation rate of the Venezuelan bolivar was a staggering 80,000%. Hugo Chavez and his successor, Nicolas Maduro, effectively killed the Venezuelan economy with socialism. It has happened before, and sadly, it is likely to happen again. The main problem with socialism is not that people aren't incentivized to work in socialist countries. On the contrary, hungry people under the threat of violence tend to work harder than most. The problem with state-owned production is that there is no free market price mechanism to reflect the true demand for goods, and therefore, no way of knowing how much supply the state should produce. Everything is in constant surplus or shortage, often the latter, as the empty supermarket shelves in Venezuela depressingly attest. Chavez and Maduro attempted to rescue the country's economy by printing more money, which simply does not work. Their true motives for printing money are, of course, questionable, given that it depreciated the value of bolivar bills to less than that of toilet paper. As mentioned in earlier chapters, inflation is the greatest hidden threat to themselves that humans have ever created. Spicy left turn here.
Yeah. Left turn in both senses. Yeah, this is one example of a hyperinflating currency. Sadly, there are many more. Turkey comes to mind, as does Argentina.
Well, but Argentina recently has the solution. Isn't it the now president of Argentina, Javier Milei, who basically said socialists are parasites who are destroying the planet, something like that?
Yes.
I forget the exact quote, but it was very, very good.
Yes. No, he's an excellent his rhetoric is excellent, and he's like he is very good at talking the talk. In my view, yet to prove if he's going to walk the walk or not. I recommend Hans Hermann Hoppe's review of Milei so far. That was very interesting. Argentina is a beautiful place. So is Venezuela, by the way, and it is depressing. By the way, this is one of the reasons I continued to write about Bitcoin was a personal thing with a guy in Venezuela that sent me a DM after one of the first articles, like first 20 articles I wrote, and thanking me for helping him, motivating him to memorize 12 words and get the fuck out of the country, basically. I don't know exactly if that's what he did or if he hid a hardware wallet or something, but he used Bitcoin to save the whatever he had in Venezuela and flee to Colombia. And that just shook my soul. I thought it was a fantastic experience to like, holy shit, my scribblings here from the bedroom can actually affect people's lives on the other side of the world. I was just baffled by that being the case. So that's a side note too. I mean, this whole paragraph is a bit of a side note, but it's good fun.
Oh yeah, and well, yeah, we've said before that these earlier books tend to take these side notes a little more liberally, yeah. and that's okay. That's okay. And I mean, but this isn't a total side note. I mean, the thing here is that the lack of scarcity in the money supply is the problem. That's entirely what it is in these countries that hyperinflate. Like, the hyperinflation doesn't happen if you are not printing the 100 million bolivar bill.
But also, normal, quote unquote, normal inflation is just hyperinflation in slow motion. Sooner or later, it leads to hyperinflation because it has to pick up pace since like interest on interest, like compound interest makes the snowball effect of the money printing inevitable at some point. And yeah, you saw that during COVID, like a third of all the dollars that have ever existed were printed during COVID. Like that's just mind-boggling to me. So it is what it is. Opt out.
Yeah. Well, the connection to socialism and Austrian economic principles and Bitcoin is one that I hope that if you're listening to this, like, we don't talk about this stuff for no reason. For me, definitely Bitcoin came first and the Austrian economic stuff came second. But the scarcity aspect of it is what got me. Like, we don't advertise it enough, us Bitcoiners. Like,
No.
This is the point of Bitcoin, and it stands in direct opposition to these fiat currencies that can be just printed into oblivion.
Yeah, inflation is literally the problem that Bitcoin solves. Like you cannot make more of it, and you cannot fake it. You cannot copy it. No, and also the thing about incentives versus price signals. That's straight out of a great Ludwig von Mises book called A Theory of Capitalism and Socialism, which is a fantastic book. It's old, but it's great in describing what the problem with socialism in particular, but statism in general is.
Austrian economics, pretty good stuff. Let's wrap this one up and cover the last paragraph. A few hundred years ago, the Catholic Church held the lion's share of political power throughout Europe. Today, power primarily resides with nation-states in collusion with multinational corporations. The separation of church and state triggered the migration of power from the former to the latter, emancipating many citizens in the process. Still, places like Venezuela are sad proof that the people are still not in power in many self-proclaimed democracies, if in any, for that matter. Another separation will have to take place first, the separation of money and state. We, the people of planet Earth, now have the means at our disposal for this separation to take place. Whether we use them or not will determine how emancipated and independent our children can and will be in the future.
Yeah, nowadays I view statism as the worst religion of them all. Maybe not of all, because there are some pretty bad ones out there, but it is a bad one. Much because it's so tempting to it's the temptation of the free lunch, right? It's people's willingness to believe that free lunches exist and that we should give out free lunches to people. But the lunches are never free. Someone has to pay for them. And redistributing wealth leads to everyone getting poorer in the end. It's just as simple as that. You get what you pay for. So if you promote laziness and not work and incentivize that, and if you disincentivize productivity, what you'll get is not productivity. You get the opposite. So you get what you're paying for, and this is true for politicians too. And unfortunately, this is how most countries work. Like there's high taxes and a lot of wealth redistribution, and everyone would be better off if we had lower tax rates and, if any, and sound money. There's also a lot of misguided credit for why things are good, and the democracy is always like hailed as this great cure-all for all societal diseases. And sure, democracies might be less violent from a certain point of view, but from another point of view, they're not, because all taxes are violence. They're threats of violence. There's a threat of violence lurking in the background. If you don't pay your taxes, men with guns will come to your house and take you away. So it depends on how you define violence. So, and I, as you know, I find this highly fascinating. And more of this in later chapters and latter books.
Yeah, I think this is a great point. And I mean, I think the specific thing to emphasize here is the separation of money and state. That's the goal. And I mean, I'm not going to necessarily speculate as to whether we're going to get rid of the concept of the state in our lifetimes. Almost certainly not, honestly, within our lifetimes or even within a couple of generations. But if we separate money from it, at least the ability to take away the base money from the nations and put it back into the hands of the individuals, then we change the game entirely, and states won't have the same power that they currently have.
No,
Maybe there will be something to organize individuals into groups for things that require larger cooperation, especially in an era where nation states are playing war games with each other or literally waging war against each other. But until some anarcho-capitalist utopia, maybe this is the best we can do in our lifetimes.
But I don't ever see like a world where there is no monopoly on power in geographical areas at all. That, in other words, where there are no states. I think that is a utopia, and that will never happen. But I also think that the correct thing to do is always to fight for your right to party, as the Beastie Boys said, and to try to, if you can, try to make the state smaller, regardless of how small it already is. It can always be smaller. That's always the right trajectory. It's always the right vector to fight for. Like, the states can always shrink a little further, and I think it's always a good thing, because I'm a what they call us, paranoid crypto-anarchist psychopath or something. Yeah.
Hey, I think this is a good conclusion to the chapter. And yeah, I mean, the concept of scarcity is really an important one. As I was saying, it's what got me. It's what convinced me. It's like, okay, this is the solution to the problem. I didn't realize that before. And the orange pill was pretty quick.
Yep.
After that, it was an easy pill, not a suppository.
That's good to hear. Maybe it's dissolvable.
Yeah.
There's a lot of vitamin C in orange pills, I hear.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Anything else to add, Knut?
To the chapter? No, I think, as I said, there are a lot of idea embryos in here, and we'll flesh them out even further in as we go deeper into these books. And yeah, I enjoy doing that.
See you next week.
Next time. Yeah.
This has been the Bitcoin Infinity Academy. Thank you for listening.